This is video 1 of a 3-video series dealing with summary of quantities for plans production. Now, for a normal set of highway plans, you're going to have a set of summary of quantities for that particular project. And in this video, we're going to talk about the seed file that we want you to use, which is a CAD file that has multiple borders inside of it. We're going to talk about that and how to create that file and how to get it set up. And then we also have a Excel file, if you wish to use it, that will aid you in creating those quantity blocks that will eventually be placed into MicroStation. So that's what we will be talking about in this particular video. So right now I have a CAD file opened up, and what we're going to do right now is actually create that summary of quantities file inside your project. So if we go to the file pull down and we select new, right now we see that our seed file, which is our source document, is set to this MoDOT design seed 2D, which that's the one that you normally use for a clean blank 2D file, but we're going to use a different file for this example. So I'm going to select this seed option, and inside of here, and it's actually underneath ORD standards, connect, config, workspaces, MoDOT, standards, and seed. But if you go underneath this design folder right here, you're going to see this particular file right here that says summary of quantities. Now you'll probably see more files underneath here, which is not set up yet, but in production you will need to look at this file right here, and that's the seed file that you're going to use to create this summary of quantities for your particular project. So I will go ahead and select that and click on open, and that will set up my source file for the file that I'm creating. Now once you have that source file or that seed file created, we're going to go ahead and name our particular file that we're wanting to create. And normally with this particular sheet, you're going to have a file naming convention for all your sheets, from your title sheet all the way down to your cross-section sheets. So on this one here, I'm going to name it 003, and that's what you normally put for a quantity sheet, underscore QU, which stands for quantities, underscore, I'm just going to put in 01 for right now because I don't know how many sheets that I'm going to use for my quantity blocks, and I can always go back in and rename my file if I need to. So I'll just put in 01 for right now, and then underscore the job number, underscore what size it is, which is an I1, which is a 1 scale border, .dgn. And I'll just do a Control C to copy it, and I'll go to my file name and do a Control V to paste it. I'm not going to worry about my description, but I will have to eventually come back in here and rename this file because I don't know how many sheets that's going to create. We may just have one summary quantity sheets, or we may have 12. So you may have to come back in here and put a -12 behind it, depending on how many sheets that you use. So once you have that, and of course you got it set in the correct folder that you want to place it, go ahead and click on OK to create that sheet. I will go ahead and check in my previous file, or I can free it. If I want to save the changes, I would check it in. If I don't want to save the changes, I'll just free it. So I'll go ahead and save my changes, so I'll check it in. And once it's finished, you will see this particular type of sheet. So this is where you'd come in here, and once you go to your Excel file that we're going to talk about later in video number 2 and video number 3, you'd actually come in there and place those quantity blocks inside of these shapes, which these shapes right here represent the sheets that are placed from the named boundary tool. So if I click on my models, I have sheet 1, which is actually this one right here, and there's a drawing model, and then there's a sheet model. So if I go back to my sheet, it's going to look just like this. So anything that I put inside of this one right here, this is sheet 1. So whenever I place my quantity blocks, I can place them inside of these areas right here accordingly, and then it will reflect inside of that sheet model. Now another way you could do it is you can come into the drawing model, which like this one right here, it says sheet 1, which is actually this shape right here. You could also go to that particular sheet model, or excuse me, you could go to that drawing model and you can place each quantity block inside of there, and it will still reflect on the sheet model, which is this right here. So for plans production, I would probably suggest for a quantity sheet, I would probably just put them in the default model and put in number 1 or number 2 or number 3, but you can also put them in the drawing models also if you wish to do that. So now that we have our DGN file set up, now what we're going to do is actually go in and set up our Excel file. So I'm going to go back into ProjectWise Explorer, and underneath our CAD standards there's a folder that says ORD standards. We'll have to expand out, connect config, workspaces, MODOT, standards, and then underneath seed. And if you go underneath design, basically this is where we're going to store all of our seed files at. You're going to see this particular Excel file right here that says summary of quantities template.xlsm. That's the file that you want to copy to your particular project. So I will simply just right click over it and do a copy, and then I will go to my project, which I'm going to just use this for this example here. If you're doing an actual project, you go to your project folder and then go to maybe your data folder or your plan sheets or wherever you want to store this particular Excel file to, and then we come in here and just do a right click over this area and do a paste. And it'll give you a prompt that says, do you want to copy this document here? Yes, I do. And now we have that summary of quantities template inside of here. Now I would suggest to rename it. That way you know it goes with that particular project. So I would just right click over it and do a rename. And I will just go ahead and put in the job number J5P0100. Summary of quantities .xlsm. And then I can just swipe through that name, and I can right click over it and do a copy, and swipe through my file name and do a right click and do a paste. Or you can also use your Control V and Control C for copy and Control V for paste. You can do that also. If you want to put a description in there, that's fine. It's not mandatory. So once we have that renamed, now we can start to utilize this summary of quantity sheets. And this is basically, like I said, just a aid for you to do your quantity sheets if you wish to do that. Now you can go into MicroStation and build your quantity blocks from scratch, where you use the place line tool and you draw your grid work and you place your text in there, which is fine and that would work, but it's a lot easier using the Excel sheet, and we'll explain how to use that here in these 3 videos that we're creating. So now I will go ahead and open up this Excel file, and you should just be able to double left click on it and it should open up in Excel. And I will go ahead and maximize it, because on the Open Roads Designer portion of it, we don't need to do anything with it right now, so we can kind of minimize it for the time being. Now the first time you open it up, you will get the security warning that says macros have been disabled. Do you want to enable those? We want to click on enable for that, because it actually uses macros to output the file to a certain location, and then it uses those files to bring that data into MicroStation. So we do want to enable the content. And there's some stuff that we're going to talk about in video number 2 and video number 3. But on this video here, if I go down to the standards tab, you're going to see that you have some drafting standards. You got text mapping and you got border mapping. This is important whenever you actually create your Excel sheet. So right now we have text mapping. What it's going to do is whatever color it is in Excel, that's how it's going to map over into ORD. So if it's a black color right here, if it's black, it's going to map over with these particular attributes for the piece of text. This is going to be the font, which is the Mo.3 font, the height, the width, what level it's on, the color, and whatnot. All the attributes for that particular piece of text. Doesn't matter how big it is in Excel, doesn't matter if it's bold, it just looks at the color of the text and that's how it maps it over. So red text would be basically large text with these attributes. Same thing for green, blue, and violet. So kind of keep that in mind whenever you're creating your quantity block, and we'll show you that in the next video on how that's going to work. And then it's the same thing for the border mapping. If it's a continuous line style, which is this right here, it's going to map it over with these attributes: this level, color, style, and weight. And if it's any other type of line style like the dot, the dash, dash dot, or whatever, it's going to map it over with these attributes. So kind of keep that in mind whenever you're actually creating your grid work. You don't want everything in a continuous line, because then it's going to map over exactly the same on everything. Everything's going to be the same. But normally your grid work inside there, you want that to be a different line weight and a different color. And we'll show you that also. So these are the attributes of how it's going to map over into MicroStation from what you have in the Excel file. You also have this MoDOT template. And in the next video, we're going to talk about how to create separate tabs for each quantity block, and actually how to go through and actually put in the information for a particular quantity block, for an example.